Hello. I think it's hysterical that I've been trying to do this Facebook Live talking about Fyre Festival, and this is our third try. It hasn't been working. So we're going to try again. Please give me a few moments while we get Felix and Jessica on. This is like their third time coming on, so let me just try again here. And Jessica. Hey,
Hey, hey,
can you hear me now?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Oh yeah, we both have
Yeah.
these fancy little AirPods, which by the way, these are Craig's. Thank God he got off from work early. And so he helped me fix these
Right.
really quick because mine have not been pairing. And we don't have
We
an
we
echo
don't.
anymore. Jessica, I have not forgotten you. Jessica is also on, but it turns out you can only have two of us on. I'm trying to bring her on and it's flipping in and out. So I'm going to actually kind of switch you
Okay,
guys on and
perfect.
off if that works. So we'll definitely still have you. So, for all of those of you who have tuned in, thank you so much for your patience while I've been trying to get this to work. I feel like this is just like Fyre
Yep,
Festival,
yep.
except way less dramatic. Thank you for your patience. I'm trying something new, which is bringing other people into the conversation for these Facebook Live videos that I've been doing. And I tried to do it on YouTube. I looked at all these things and I could not figure it out. And then I tried to do it on my desktop. I thought it would be much better quality. Turns out you can't do it. So we're just figuring this out on the go, which I think is what event
Right.
planners do best. So, what I'm going to do today for this conversation is I want to introduce the Fyre Festival itself just because I've actually still run into people who have never heard of it or who just don't know what all the drama is about. And of course, I think that's super important. But I also want to introduce the two guests that we have today. And of course, anyone else who's watching, I would love to hear all of your thoughts about this event as well. Felix, do you want to just introduce yourself and who you are as a planner, but also your role in Fyre Festival? Because I'll be fully honest, I wasn't there, I wasn't involved. So I'm one of those social media lurkers. And I've done my research by watching the Hulu and Netflix
Right.
documentaries, but I have a lot to learn. So please introduce
So
yourself.
my name is Felix. I do a little bit of everything. But special events is really my thing. I'm the director of special events at CUNY and was hired prior to working at CUNY to work the Fyre Festival as assistant creative producer. That's kind of like, we'll delve into everything else because that just, there's a lot. Yeah.
Yes, there is. Now I'm going to pop you off
Okay.
for a second so I can bring Jessica into the conversation. Jessica is a good friend of mine, and she and I have been we've worked together on several events. And so I want to add her to the conversation as well. Jess, you
Hi,
there?
I'm
Hey,
here.
sorry about all that back and forth.
Oh, no problem.
So why don't you introduce yourself so that people know who you are, so that gives a little context to your thoughts today.
Sure. Well, I'm Jessica Levin with 7 Degrees Communications and very active in the events industry on a lot of different fronts. And Liz and I actually just spent a few days together working a show out in California. But we had also worked together on a project with a former client of mine that had gone wrong and had a lot of similar aspects to it that to Fyre Festival. So we thought it would be a great conversation, and I certainly have a lot of thoughts on it.
Yeah, Jess and I were, as she just said, we were in San Francisco together and we had lunch one day and we just started talking about it. And it was like an hour later, we still were talking. So we won't chew your ear off for an entire hour. But Jess, I'm going to flip you off so I can go back to Felix for a second. But so what I'll do is just identify what Fyre Festival is so you all know. And then I want to bring Felix on to talk about a little bit of the behind the scenes, but specifically in the events industry, we're interested in like what went wrong, what were the warning signs, how did it all go down from his perspective, but more importantly, what are the lessons that we can learn? And then Jess and I are going to jump on too and talk a little bit more about the lessons and the warning signs, because I think this could really happen to almost any event planner, and it's very easy to judge from the outside and say they should have been doing this or they should have been doing that. But anyway, so in case you have missed the whole Fyre Festival boat, I'm going to do a very broad level. Again, I was not at the event, but it was this very hyped festival that they were doing in the Bahamas. They had some really cool influencer marketing behind this, which I think was the huge engine behind tons of people buying very expensive tickets. If anyone has ever told you it's hard to charge like $299 for an event, you should check out their marketing strategy, because they were selling like $40,000 tickets. It was crazy. But apparently, what it seems like is the event was very hyped and kind of put out there in a big way, but was not able to deliver. One of the big things that I know everyone's talking about in the events industry is that they started planning this with just a few weeks' notice, and they had not even secured the space in the Bahamas yet. And so basically, a lot of people got to this island. There was nothing ready for them. And it basically went wildly viral on social media. And so now there have been, the organizer has been sentenced to 6 years in jail. And he has already come out with some other kind of fraudulent activities, which I find really crazy. If you want a better download on what exactly happened, at least from documentary standpoint, there is a documentary on Hulu, which I found to be good for anyone who like is not familiar with what happened and is just curious about the process and what exactly happened. The second documentary is put together on Netflix. And the Netflix one, I think, was a little bit more about the people who were involved behind the scenes. And I have my own thoughts about that. So Felix was actually featured in the first one, which was the Hulu one. So if you watch the Hulu one, you're going to see him famous on Hulu. But I want to bring him back into the conversation now to hear just what all happened from his perspective. Felix, can you tell us like how you got involved in this project, and really what you want people to know about what happened? We all saw it on the documentary most likely, but I'm sure your experience was very different from that.
So let's go back to what you were saying about the marketing. The marketing is really what got me, because I got a phone call. It was probably March 11th or March 12th. I still remember the date. And they're like, hey, there's this whole thing going on in the Bahamas, this Fyre Festival, and Kanye's a part of it. And I said, okay, Kanye's a part of it. Sure, whatever. So I go on my Instagram and I start Googling it, and I start looking it up on Instagram, looking it up on Google. And it was what you saw on both documentaries. It was just great promo. And as a millennial myself, I was like, whoa, who wouldn't want to be a part of this? So I'm like, okay, yeah, I'm down. Literally, I got the call on a Saturday. On a Tuesday, I was on a plane out to Miami, which is where our headquarters were prior to, going down to Exuma. I remember walking into, it was the Soho House in Miami in South Beach. And literally was very confused, because it was just all over the place. It was like maybe 15 people in the room talking all kinds of stuff. And I was actually hired by Mark Musters, who, if anyone on here knows Mark Musters, knows that he's kind of all over the place himself too. And he'll just be like, get me this and I want that and blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, okay, yeah, sure. So at this point, I felt like an errand boy almost. And I'm like, let me just figure out what's going on. And it wasn't until like day 3 that I'm like, okay, I don't think this is going to happen, but these people have money. If you have the money and you have the access, then fine, we'll be able to pull it together. But when we hit ground on Exuma, that's when it really, it's embarrassing as an event professional to say that I actually stayed. And especially after what I saw. I literally went to Roker's Point and there was nothing there. It was all gravel. And, you kind of stand there and you're like, okay, how are we going to do this? And then Mark Musters, who's someone that, I look up to in the events industry, he's like, no, we're going to do it. We're going to get it done. And I'm like, all right, if you say we're going to do it, then we're going to get it done. And I was hired as assistant creative producer. So he and I were working side by side on putting it together. And to be completely honest with you, I mean, we did everything we could do to get everything there. There were just other things that weren't falling into place.
I want to talk to you a second about the idea of staying, because I mentioned that this is something that it's very easy, I think, from the outside to judge and say, these event people clearly didn't know what they were doing, because if you saw the timeline, you would know it's not possible and you should have left,
Right.
And I think the influencer part that you started talking about was a good start to this, because, I think there's a lot involved in terms of the trust level. Like you said, this was an event person that you trusted. You look online and all these famous people are tweeting about it and posting about it. And I think that adds a lot of credibility, at least in today's society. And then the
Right.
question is, do you stay or do you go? So how did you make that decision? I think that's something every person decided differently. Um,
um, so I decided to stay. Well, my on a personal level, I'm one of those. I fight for it. I keep going. I'm like, you know what? This seems impossible, but we can do it. And as an event professional, everything there's always something that goes wrong, and we can always fix it. So in the back of my mind, it was like, no, there's a fix for this. There's a fix for that. But at the same time, there were two things. So I had cleared my entire calendar for the remaining of the season. So my spring and summer was completely clear because I said, with the paycheck I'm going to get from this, which was they offered me a whole lot of money,
of course.
and I didn't get all of it, obviously. But I said I can use this money to pay some of my bills for the summer and really focus on growing my business. So I saw it as an opportunity. So that was the first part. The second part was, especially when I really realized that it wasn't going to happen, I said, you know what, I'm working with a lot of high level event professionals. And I hope that they'll see my professionalism in the fact that I'm staying here and I'm, taking one for the team and just going and working till the end. So hopefully once this is said and done, they'll look to me for future events and future opportunities. I'm still waiting to hear back from anyone. But that's really why I
And
stayed,
looking back,
honestly.
from the very beginning when you were first contacted all the way through to the end, for the sake of other event planners who have been caught in this or could be caught in similar things in the future, were there any warning signs? I know you don't really notice them in the moment, or you kind of feel it in your gut and you're like, no, it's going to be fine. It's going to be fine. But looking back, it's a lot easier to
Right.
see.
So yeah, no, there were many warning signs, and I knew right then and there that
Okay.
those were warning signs. Here's the thing: what people don't realize, and what they don't show enough of on either one of the documentaries, is how involved some of us really were. So when you look at Roker's Point, that entire, I don't even know what to call it,
It
but
wasn't
that
an
entire
island.
piece of gravel land, whatever you want to, it wasn't an island, definitely wasn't. But it was myself and this other guy named Ben McRoberts. We were the ones in charge of that. So Ben was on the ground making sure that everything was being built, and I was on the back end working with Melissa Rogan, ordering all of the stuff. So I'm on Amazon, I'm on Wayfair, just kind of figuring out how we can get all the beds and all of the interiors of the tents and everything that we need for concierge. And I literally had to attack Billy, and I have the text messages still. I need money. I need this. And he'll send me screenshots of a credit card, and I'll use that credit card to buy things. I have screenshots of the wire transfers that he sent over for to the people in Miami, where we were getting all the VIP stuff from. So I saw the warning signs because he would send me the form of payment, but it wouldn't go through. And at this point, it's like, well, what's going on? So then he'll then come back and say, oh, it's because we're in the Bahamas, and it's a little weird, and the way the wiring works and all this other stuff. And I, to be honest, and it's not, I don't speak negatively about anyone. I'm speaking the facts. Mark Musters, who was the person that I reported to, I mentioned to him one day, I said, Mark, I don't think this is going to happen. And Mark looked at me and said, Felix, stop being so negative. Be positive. We can do this. And I said, okay, if you said we can do it,
That
then we'll
seems
do it.
like a pretty consistent thing, is like everyone was saying, we only find solutions. There's no negativity here. We're just going to be involved.
Right.
And so there was one line in the Netflix one, I think it was, that really resonated with me. And I think it was Andy King, who said something like, the events industry, it was like everything was on fire. But in the events industry, everything is always on fire. It's like hard to determine how much of this is
Right.
just insanity. It cannot happen. And I mean, I've been on some really legit great events, and up to the last minute, I'm not sure we're going to pull it together. That's just kind of
Right.
the industry. And I don't know. That's just something that stuck with me because I was thinking I could only imagine being involved. And I do want to bring Justin in this conversation because we were not, it wasn't the same scale in terms of influence and stuff, but we did get involved with something like this. And
Right.
I mean, we were going back and forth the whole time. It's like, are the payments going to be made? You know, are we, but you just never know
Right.
when. I think that line is really hard to tell. Like, where are we right now?
It is.
Any other thoughts in terms of what you wish people would just think about or know, or especially for the event planners who watch this, just things to watch out for?
Things to watch out for. Well, here's the thing. Everything was planned out so perfect on their end, on Fyre Media's end. We had contracts, we had reassurance. He had an entire team. He had a CFO who we had access to, Grant, who was on both of the films. It's a little crazy, but we had access to him. So it was kind of like, honestly, I can't even say what it would. It was done so well.
And so you guys were hired through Jerry Media? Is that how it worked? No. Okay.
No. I came in through Mark Musters needed help, and he brought me in, so I came in through
okay.
Fyre Media.
So wait, Fyre Media was who? I don't really remember that part from the documentary.
So Fyre Media is Billy McFarland.
Oh, right.
So Fyre Media is Billy McFarland and Ja Rule, and that's the entire app that they were developing, and that's the reason for Fyre Festival.
Okay, and question you might not know: how the heck did Ja Rule get out of all of this with like nothing? Is it because Billy's name was on the check?
Pretty much. I think that's what it was. I think Ja Rule really came in as an influencer, but they try to hype it up as if he were a bigger part of it. Granted, he was in a lot of the meetings, and he was, to be completely honest with you, much more involved than Billy was on a level. Like when we were in our meetings, he would ask the right questions. Billy would just be sitting there with his friends and kind of goofing around and not doing much.
You think Billy's going to come back and do another crazy stunt?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, of course.
I think people like that just can't stop.
Yeah.
And that's actually a really good transition to my conversation with Jess. Thank you for joining. Right. And if you have anything else to say, just put it in the comments, and we can also bring you back live too. But thank you. So let me bring Jess back on, and I want her to say what exactly happened with our experience. Because quite frankly, it's not my role. It was actually her client, and I was helping her out. So Jess, you could share anything right now, kind of the experience that we worked on, or you could just jump right into Fyre if you don't want to talk too much about that.
Well, honestly, I think it's almost the same conversation. And part of it is that you don't work on these events alone, and you work on them with other people who you respect, other people who do deliver. And you have to think that at some point, like, everybody is going to make it happen, and you put trust in all of these other people because they all have been in business for a long time. Like Fyre Festival, right? They've all been in business for a long time, and the funding always comes from somewhere. It always works out. So whether it's some of the events that I worked on and really ended up getting, screwed or really put in, a bad position, a lot of it had to do with the fact that it wasn't just me and the organizers. There were lots of other parties who had a stake in it. And so you think, okay, the money has to come in. It has to go off because there's too many parties that are involved. But the truth is that everybody's in the same position. Everybody just assumes that, the money is going to come. And, I think the biggest thing is red flags are red flags. And in life, like when we ignore them, it usually doesn't work out. And that's, I think you have to be able to distinguish between it being on fire or, like we were just at a trade show a couple days ago, and you walk in 2 days before an enormous trade show and everything is a disaster, right? There's forklifts everywhere, but you have no doubt in your mind that in 2 days it's going to open and everything's going to be beautiful because we see that happen over and over and over again. Yeah. So why would this be any different? So I totally understand how, whether it's Felix or it's Mark Musters or it's any of the other people involved, it's easy to get sucked in. And so even in the case of this, where there were celebrities, there was Ja Rule, and I worked on events where there were, big name musicians and big name athletes, you get excited and you want to be a part of it. And, there's some sense of pride. Like, I'm working on an event of this scale.
Yeah.
You definitely have to fight your ego a little bit and listen to that voice inside your head that says, maybe not.
And those are the hard decisions because you kind of feel it in your gut. But in terms of like saying, okay, I just don't think this is going to be the right event. And it might take until the event happens, or sometimes it might take like years later to realize, oh, that was a good call. And so that whole time does not feel really comfortable. And so I think a lot of people kind of stick with it. It's kind of like, hey, well, if it doesn't go well, at least I could say I was part of it. And, so I think that's interesting. But I also wanted to ask you about the marketing side of things, because of course you are all about marketing. And I thought the influencer marketing campaign that they did on Instagram was genius. Maybe you could tell people what it is in case they don't know, but I wanted to see your thoughts. And I wonder if they have just ruined influencer marketing.
So it's so interesting. So if you don't know, and if you watch the documentaries, they talk about this, that they got a number of influencers who were paid money to do this. They were models and just people who have made their fame from being Instagram influencers, including Kendall Jenner, who was paid $250,000 for a post, which is just
Hey, when
insane.
we make that money, we're going to be living large.
Well, yeah. So, I mean, that's like the whole thing, that she's so powerful that people listen to her so much that one post can draw so much attention.
Yeah.
But what they did, and this was the genius part, was that they all put up these orange squares. No other photo, just these squares, and they all did it at the same time. And so people who followed this group of models saw this, like, well, what is this? And it broke out from the noise of just seeing sexy pictures all the time. So, I mean, from that perspective, it was absolutely genius. But yeah, I mean, to your point about has it ruined influencer marketing? I don't think so. I mean, I think that the people involved who went, and if you watch these documentaries, and like, people are laughing at them, right? They're spoiled rich kids who didn't have anything better to do but spend thousands of dollars to fly off to the Bahamas because a model said so. I mean, it's kind of funny. And so maybe they won't listen in the future, but I'm pretty sure that Kendall Jenner's still making $250,000 per post. And there are still a lot of people who see these people who they admire, who they respect, who they want to be like. And if they say something, if they say, go buy X product, go buy this dress, go buy this pair of shoes, go buy this car, whatever it is, people will do it because of this perceived, well, it's influence, but perceived knowledge and perceived power, that if I do what they're doing, I'm going to be like them. I'm going to have that same level of success. Maybe I'll even get paid $250,000 for a post.
What I thought was crazy was, I mean, so we see someone that we trust post something, and automatically it's like, ooh, it must be serious. And Jess and I were talking about this when we were in San Francisco. It's like, well, if Jess recommended I read a book, I would read it because I think, well, yeah, I mean, I'm sure it's good. And so that's like my trust in you. But what I thought was so crazy was that these influencers were posting, and like, they didn't even know what they were posting about. You would think that in order to, even if you paid me $250,000 to post a tweet, I'd have to have some clue what I was getting myself into. And I think maybe the most genius thing about the Fyre Festival was the marketing around it. Whoever did, I guess it was Jerry Media or whatever, the branding, the look of the packages. I mean, on paper, it was a beautiful event. I think it's a crazy thing, though, that you can just create a concept, completely sell it with absolutely no information, and then get these influencers just by paying them to make this like the most legit thing ever.
Well, I think that brings up two things. One is that if they're getting paid, they assume, there is just that automatic assumption that things are happening. Right? If somebody has $250,000 to spend, why would somebody ever doubt that there wasn't meat behind it, that there wasn't substance about it? They have the cash, right? That doesn't happen every day. So, you'd think, well, it's kind of an ethical concern. They didn't do their homework, but getting paid, a significant amount of money is kind of like, check that box. Okay, this is legit. But it's the same thing, like when I've worked on some of these events we're talking about, there was some pretty sexy marketing. I mean, I was involved in the marketing, but even before, it's not that difficult to get some flashy graphics out there and make
Yeah.
something look really high end. I mean, you can do that for virtually nothing. You can make it look professional if you know what you're doing. I mean, that's what we do every day, right? We try to make things look as professional as possible.
Yeah.
And that can just be smoke and mirrors. We don't ask those questions because it's, if you see something and it's, we've all seen these events or even, products, somebody gives you a business card and you can tell that they had it done at Staples, right? And you're like, they're
Right.
not really like legit in business. But then if they have a really well-branded card, it makes a difference, regardless of whether or not they're legitimate or not. So it's
Right,
that
exactly.
perception versus reality that marketers, I mean, that's what we go for. But as event industry people, I think, that just understanding that our reputations are at stake and we have to do extra due diligence because we know we can make anything look sexy.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's so many lessons, which is why I wanted to have this conversation, just from an event perspective, whether you're involved directly like Felix, or if you were one of the lucky ones who kind of just gets to watch it and not have to be involved in all the crazy drama. I mean, so many warning signs on every level. Like he was talking about on the event planning side, there's, like, I don't know if we can pull this off. Okay, I don't think we can pull this off. There's no way we're pulling this off. And there's all those levels. But for the attendees, I know that they were also experiencing a lot of like, I haven't gotten my flight info. Where am I staying? And then, the crazy, Jerry Media was basically just blocking everybody. They were just going and blocking keywords and blocking people who said anything, even if it was a question. It wasn't necessarily like anything else. But I think that's such a big warning sign that we all have to be more aware of. And Corey Franzway is asking a really good question related to what I was just about to ask. So this is perfect. How is this scam going to affect other startup live events? And what due diligence is going to be required of event promoters? But even if, and the truth is, I don't think there's going to be much due diligence required of event promoters. That's just my personal opinion. I think that's really sad. But I think we're in a very unregulated industry. But I do think, regardless of that, there should be some due diligence that we are at least paying attention to and kind of requiring of ourselves. So if you have any thoughts on this, and I want to bring Felix back in on this question too, because this conversation is like, it's cool to marvel at everything that happened, but I also want to think about some things that we really should be thinking about in our industry to make sure these things don't happen to us. We can't necessarily guarantee they never happen again, but how do we kind of prevent ourselves from being involved in something like this in the future?
Well, so I know, and I don't necessarily know like Billy McFarland's background, but I know in the case of the events that I was involved in, digging deeper into the owner, I mean, he had a track record of little things, right? And it's just really things like reputation check. And, sure, I know like in this case, people were vouching for him, but you really have to do a reference check on the person who is funding it, the person who owns the event, and do some homework. Because if they're a scammer, and I mean, I think in the one of the documentaries, they were talking about him going out and doing it again. Scammers don't stop. So if they did it once, they'll probably do it again. So if they're doing it to you or you're involved in something, there's a good chance they've already done this. Maybe not at the same scale, but certainly at a smaller scale. And I think just really doing a thorough background check is the first start.
I think, a lesson for planners is that it's almost like an interview. I remember telling people, like, when you're interviewing for a job, you're interviewing the company as much as they're interviewing you. So you're trying to figure out, are they the right fit? And I think in the event planning industry, one thing to watch for is that it's not just anyone who will hire me, I will work for them. But to Jess's point, what kind of research are you doing on your clients to identify that they're the right people to, and I'll be the first to admit, I am not good at this. It's something I'm going to be paying a lot more attention to. But I remember one time I had someone who they reached out, they wanted me to do a proposal for them. And I was really excited. She wanted to do it at the United Nations building. It was a really big event. And so I was working on the proposal and I sent it to Ed, who I've worked with for years. And he says, "Hey, Liz, did you see this?" And he just starts sending me links about this woman. And they weren't anything positive. And so I reached out to the person who had referred me and she was like, yeah, but that was in her past. And I just had that gut feeling. I was like, no. So I ended up telling her we weren't going to be able to write a proposal for her. And that was the first time I've ever done that. But identifying those warning signs early and doing your research, I think is a really good point, because it's great to have the business, but it's not great if you don't end up getting paid and you have horrible experience. I remember the event I worked with you. We signed on some great vendors to work on the event, but we were the ones doing the research, and then they don't get paid and you feel horrible. So, a liability not only for yourself but for anyone that you're working to hire and all the people who are involved, and then definitely of course the attendees.
Yeah, I think you actually said it though, is trust your gut too. You can do all the research in the world, but if you have that feeling, go with it. Even if the end it turns out it was okay and you lost money, sometimes, your gut usually doesn't lie, and that's probably one of the best pieces of due diligence you can do, as maybe hokey as it sounds.
No, it's totally true. Well, thank you so much for sharing your thoughts. I want to bring Felix on to ask him about this question too. Felix, let me jump you back in here. This is not that user friendly, by the way, if any of you love live stream on Facebook, but we're going to do it anyway. We're making it happen. All right, Felix is jumping back in. Hello. Oh, there he is. How you doing?
Cut off
You're cut off?
a little bit.
Oh, I was just saying hi.
I didn't hear the last thing you said.
Welcome back. So I want to ask you about this question. Like, what does due diligence look like for these events going forward? What are the changes you're going to make in your business to kind of make sure for yourself that these things don't happen? And also for the other question was for event promoters. Like, what kinds of things should we be looking for to know, is this legit or not?
I mean, when it comes to due diligence, I went online and I Googled Billy. I Googled so much about this man and Fyre Media. And Fyre Media was actually relatively new, so there was not much online about it. The one thing I will say is that before Fyre Festival happened, there was not a lot of negative things put out there about Billy. There was one article from MSNBC on Magnesis with regards to what had happened and whatnot. But then everything else that was on there regarding Magnesis and regarding Billy was actually pretty positive. It wasn't anything super, super bad. So that's when I was like, okay, this might be legit. The one thing that did, I was like, he's 25. I don't know how well versed he is in this field, but we'll see. But what I would probably do differently is possibly call references. So just dig even deeper and see what other companies this person has worked with in the past, and just contact them and see what their experience was like. Because I think that's something that maybe a lot of us fail to do. A lot of us saw the social media campaigns and was like, oh my God, this is going to be amazing.
I think that's a good point. And Jessica's saying always Google. And if there's not a lot out of there, that's a problem too. So like you said, you were finding some pretty decent information and it looked really positive. What about, and we don't have to get into too much detail with this if you don't want, but from a contract standpoint, are there any things you wish you had in your contract that maybe would have protected you? I know Jessica was telling me, I hate to speak on your behalf, Jess, but we can't have three of us on here for some reason, that for one of her events, she was a little bit nervous about the person and she ended up having them pay 100% upfront, and it ended up saving her because they ended up not paying basically everybody else. I know that's not reasonable for every possible event, but I'm just wondering, and I'm thinking about this myself, like what are the clauses we should be putting in that say, if at some point you're not holding your end of the bargain, we're out. And I do have like a clause in mind that says you're responsible for timely communication, etc. I don't think it covers me nearly as much as it should. And if you don't, then that basically cancels our contract and we're owed 100%. Do you have anything like that or anything you would think about?
Right. Well, the contract was very, I mean, I had lawyers look over the contract before I even signed it and everything. And on their end, they made sure to put all of that on the contract with the exception of payment in full upfront, which I think would have been the saving grace. Because to be completely honest with you, I came back to all this debt um, based on what they owed me. So definitely either 50% or full payment upfront prior to. I think it's something that
And
would have
these are the
helped
moments,
me
and Sarah
significantly.
Vaynerman is also saying she has 50% upfront and then everything is due by the date of service. I actually
Oh,
have mine always due at least 2 weeks before the actual event, so that it's kind of like I'm not even showing up on site unless
right.
everything is paid. Um, but these are the kinds of moments where you're like,
Yep.
maybe you have your clients, maybe my line is they book the travel, because there's been many times where I book it and then I kind of invoice them at the end.
Right.
That's one place you could lose, especially in your case, if you're like
Right.
staying for 3+ weeks in the
Hmm.
Bahamas. Um,
Right.
oh,
Well,
good.
they did pay for
Yeah, I
travel.
mean,
They paid for
so the
everything.
budget was
Oh yeah, they paid
basically,
for
this is
everything.
my ultimate question, right? And I'm sure it's a guess for you as much as it is for any of us. You think this whole thing was a really well thought out? No, I mean, okay, we can't say it was well thought out. This was a really well intentioned event with some great concepts that just didn't happen. Or do you think it was fraud from the beginning? He needed to make some money in order to cover all these other things he had done. And he thought, here's a way to make some serious cash. And he was really wrong. And then he just kept getting himself deeper and deeper.
Despite everything that happened, I'm gonna go with the first option. I think that they really did try to pull this off. I mean, if you think about it, it just makes no sense. He didn't leave with any money. He had no money in his pocket when this was all said and done. So think I think he really wanted this to happen, but he just didn't know how to really handle it. And it just because of everything that he's done in the past,
Yeah.
this just kind of how it caught up to him and it kind of
Man, I think
screwed him over.
I've worked with a few very well-intentioned entrepreneurs in the past who, like their visions are huge and they're just used to that. Like if I run out of money, I'll come up with another little thing and it'll bring in a little extra money and I'll make it over that hump and we're going to make it happen. And
Right.
I do actually think it landed a little bit more on that side. But even after, Sarah was just saying the exact same thing. He was running that New York City VIP list and like selling these tickets. I mean, like if you don't learn your
Yeah.
lesson after a fire festival, that's what made me think maybe this is more of a
Yeah. I mean,
scam than
he's a con artist, so that could be it too. He wants to be known. He's young. He wants to be with this influencer too. And I know we have to go, but one of the things that they kept saying is that he's so
no.
charismatic and all. I didn't see that at all in person, nor in no. He's not. There's no charisma. There's no personality. In all honesty, to me, he was this kind of he was a nerd growing up, and he was
Hey, that's
teased
me.
for being a nerd, and he was just trying to be the cool kid.
Yeah, yeah.
But he didn't embrace it. You embrace it. We embrace it. It's cool. I'm the awkward guy. He
Yeah.
didn't embrace it. He wanted to be cool. He wanted to be down, and you know, that could possibly be the driving force behind all of
This
this.
is such an interesting conversation. And like I said, when Jess and I were talking about it, we were literally talking for like over an hour about it. And I could talk to you guys about it for a long time. And I can tell by the comments that people have a lot to say. Um, I think this is just the starting point for a good
Right.
conversation. And I'm totally game for doing more of these conversations and thinking about other aspects. Like I know Craig brought up that influencers should be held to a higher standard when it comes to the kind of content that they're sharing. And
Right.
I think this conversation about as an event planner how we are so focused on like do the job at whatever cost, get it done. I think that that's something we really have to explore more
Hmm.
because it's one of the things. It's like everyone's so proud that event planners are like the top 5 most stressful jobs every single year. I think that's a huge problem. It's like,
Right.
really? I don't think we should be so excited
It
that
is.
we're completely stressed out. And I don't know that we should be so proud of the fact that we make things happen at all costs, because I think it gets us into a really dangerous place. That being said, it's really hard to know when am I getting in too deep, when am I not, and like all these warning flags, we're kind of taught to just, you know, let it ride. make it seem like it's going to be fine. You know, I've definitely had clients who are like, don't tell the sponsors
Right.
how many people we actually have coming, because I promised them 1,000 and we have 200, but I'm gonna fill it with my friends, and you know, it's like, so I think ethics is something we really have to talk about. There are a few ethics experts in the industry who are coming to my mind right now that I want to talk to. But I wanted to thank you and Jess for your time. Unfortunately, we can't do Facebook Lives all day. If you
Thank
guys
you.
are in the New York City area, I hope you stay warm. And especially like in Chicago, is that this whole East Coast, I think, is being hit pretty hard. I'm definitely missing San
Hmm.
Francisco, where we were last week. Um, I am going to be doing more Facebook Lives. And for all of you who were on from the very beginning, thank you for all the patience. Was our third try at getting this video going. And so I'm just learning. And I am, as Felix said, I'll just admit it. I'm a weird techie who is not always correct with how things work. And I'm okay with being the geek. Um, so thank you for joining. Please continue to comment on this thread, especially if you end up watching it after we end up signing off. And a huge thanks to Felix for sharing your real in-person experience. I feel like I'm talking to a celeb just because you're here and you were on Hulu. I've never been on Hulu.
Look, I'm internet
And then
famous,
also,
is
of
what I
course, to
tell people.
Jessica for sharing her experience, because I think we've all been through a version of this and had a wide range of clients that we just thought we're going to make
Hmm.
this work and I'm not sure how. And so I don't think we all like to share it though. So I appreciate her sharing her feedback. Keep commenting. I'll keep posting the videos, and thank you everyone. Have a wonderful day. And until I see you all again, keep hustling hard. Thank